Hey guys, tonight we kick off something strange. You tried reading Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, not once, not twice, but for 30 whole days. Cover to cover, every smug little chapter. You even did the part where he tells you to stare at your reflection in the mirror and yell about how wealthy you're becoming. Yes, that happened. You became that person. Your cat still hasn't recovered from the trauma. So, what changed? At first, not much. You opened the book like it was some kind of ancient relic, thinking it might spontaneously burst into flames or secrets. It didn't. It smelled like that used bookstore on Main Street that also sells incense and tarot cards, and if you're honest, the first few pages made you feel like you joined a mid-century motivational cult. Which, in a way, you had. But then, a funny thing happened. Around day 3, as you reread Hill's insistent ramblings about definiteness of purpose, you actually started thinking about what that purpose might be. Not in the change your life overnight way, but in the maybe I should finish one thing before I start 17 others, kind of way. Revolutionary, right? And Napoleon Hill, oh, he wasn't messing around. He wrote this in the 1930s, in the middle of the Great Depression, when people were selling apples on the street just to survive. And here he is, talking about autosuggestion like it's a superhero power. You kind of have to respect the audacity. While the rest of the world was rationing food and hiding money under mattresses, Hill was like, you can think yourself rich, bro. It's the original hustle mindset. So you tried it. You wrote out your goals. You read them out loud twice a day. You visualized. You whispered weird things about abundance at your toothbrush. You even did the visualization exercise at Starbucks once, and yes, the barista definitely noticed. Now, about those changes. Let's be clear, you didn't wake up in a yacht. Your bank account didn't suddenly add a few zeros while you slept. But your brain? It shifted. Slightly. Quietly. Like when your phone updates overnight and you barely notice until the icons are a little rounder. You started catching yourself. Every time you thought, I could never do that, there was this tiny Napoleon Hill voice in your head, going, but have you tried thinking it first? And honestly, that's annoying, but weirdly helpful. Also, here's a philosophical concept you didn't expect to meet in a self-help book from the 30s, self-efficacy, the belief in your own ability to execute behaviors necessary to produce specific performance attainments. Fancy, right? Albert Bandura coined the term decades later, but Hill was hinting at it all along. When he tells you to build belief through repetition, he's talking about rewiring your confidence, like it's a muscle you can train. And that brings us to the funny part. Around day 12, you decided to do a Napoleon Hill-style affirmation before an important Zoom call. You whispered your personal statement of desire, something about abundance and fearless clarity, just as your mic unmuted. Your coworker stared at you. You stared back. There was silence. Then she said, that was powerful, and you both moved on like nothing happened. But deep down, you knew the truth, Napoleon Hill just crash-landed into your career. Here's the real shift, though, you stopped reacting like a soggy pancake to setbacks. When stuff went wrong, and it did, you had this new reflex to pause, breathe, and ask, okay, what would the guy who thinks and grows rich do? You didn't always have the answer, but at least you weren't spiraling. You were, dare we say, becoming slightly more composed. And yes, you also noticed this, the book talks about money, sure, but it's really about energy. Mental energy. Emotional energy. You get to choose where it goes. And instead of letting it dribble down the drain of social media, you started pouring it into that one thing you actually care about. The project. The side hustle. The dream you never said out loud because you didn't want to sound naive. Well, guess what? Napoleon Hill thinks naive is just another word for visionary. So here you are, 30 days later, still not a millionaire, still occasionally yelling at traffic, but undeniably more focused. More awake. More intentional. It's subtle. You're not levitating or anything, but your calendar has fewer accidental naps and more bullet points with action verbs. That's something. And if all else fails, at least you learned that your cat prefers silence during your nightly abundance ritual. Hey guys, tonight we explore a chapter that made you pause, blink a few times, and mutter, "Wait, what now?" It's day 7. You've been a good little Napoleon Hill student. You've read about desire, faith, persistence, autosuggestion, all the good, wholesome self-improvement stuff. But then, you hit chapter 11. And right there, in bold metaphorical letters, Hill throws a curveball that smacks you in the frontal lobe: transmutation of sexual energy. You reread it. You're pretty sure you didn't misinterpret it. Nope, he's saying it. He's definitely saying it. According to Napoleon Hill, one of the secrets to success is redirecting your ahem passions into your work. Like taking primal instinct and turning it into creative rocket fuel. And somehow, he's absolutely serious about it. At first, you laugh. You scoff. You whisper, "What the actual," under your breath. But then, curiosity kicks in. Is this just 1930s moralizing? Or is there something weirdly brilliant here? So you do what any modern overthinker would do. You Google it. And what you find is oddly validating. Apparently, the idea of sublimating desire into creativity goes way back. Freud talked about it. Carl Jung gave it a thoughtful nod. The idea even pops up in ancient yogic traditions. And that's when you meet your scholarly term of the night, sublimation, the process of channeling socially unacceptable impulses into socially acceptable activities. Like instead of doom-scrolling dating apps at 2 a.m., you write poetry. Or finish your taxes. Or build an app. Which, when you think about it, is kind of what every tortured artist has done since time began. Napoleon Hill argues that the people who achieve the most are often the ones who've learned how to redirect their libidos into ambition. He even lists a bunch of historical men who supposedly used their sex energy to become great. You're reading this thinking, did Abraham Lincoln really transmute his sexual energy into the Gettysburg Address? Was Thomas Edison just inventing light bulbs to keep his hands busy? Still, you give it a try. Not in a weird or extreme way. But you start noticing, you do have bursts of energy at random times. Energy that often gets wasted on distractions. And Hill's advice is essentially, instead of letting that impulse control you, let it fuel you. Turn it into a sprint toward your goals. You even conduct a little experiment. On a random Tuesday, instead of letting yourself sink into the usual fog of midweek malaise, you crank up your to-do list and channel every flicker of restlessness into productivity. Emails. Research. A project proposal you've been ignoring for 3 months. Boom. Done. You're a machine. You're basically a lighthouse made of espresso and weird ambition. It's not glamorous, but it works. Of course, there are hiccups. Like the day you tried explaining this energy redirection concept to a friend over brunch and they just blinked and said, "So you're celibate now?" And you were like, "No, I'm productive." And then you both stared into your waffles for a full minute. Still, Hill wasn't totally off base. Even in history, this shows up more often than you'd think. Take Leonardo da Vinci, for instance. The guy was famously detached from romantic entanglements, but wildly prolific. Paintings, engineering designs, anatomy, sketches. He was a productivity fountain. Some scholars suggest his creative genius was directly linked to his ability to channel internal urges into his work. He was basically a Renaissance-era think and grow rich case study. And here you are, 7 days into this journey, realizing that maybe Napoleon Hill wasn't just tossing out weird moral platitudes. Maybe he was onto something subtle, that your most powerful energy, the stuff that pulls your attention the hardest, can actually be your superpower, if you learn how to steer it. It doesn't mean becoming a monk. It just means becoming mindful. Like realizing that every time you scroll Instagram for 20 minutes, just to relax, you could have written a blog post. Or designed a logo. Or finally learned what the cloud actually is. So you start small. You create a little routine. When the restlessness kicks in, when you're bored, lonely, distracted, you pause. You breathe. You do one purposeful thing. And sometimes, that's enough. You knock out a few tasks. You sketch out a plan. You clean your closet, which somehow leads to organizing your entire life. Is it magic? No. It's just redirection. Napoleon Hill might have wrapped it in lofty language and 30s bravado, but the core of his point is surprisingly modern: where your focus goes, your energy flows. And if you don't choose where it flows, it chooses for you. Usually toward TikTok. By the end of week 1, you feel different. Not holy or transcendent. Just a little more in control. A little more alert. And a lot more amused that one of the most useful ideas in the book came disguised as the weirdest chapter title. So yes, Hill is serious. Uncomfortably serious. But maybe that's why it sticks with you. Hey guys, tonight we peel back the glossy wrapping paper and realize something kind of underwhelming. After days of whispering affirmations, reading about desire, and dodging metaphysical landmines like infinite intelligence, you finally get it. The secret? It's not actually a secret. It's repetition. Repetition, repetition, repetition. You feel a little betrayed. You were promised ancient wisdom, forbidden knowledge, the golden thread that ties together the ultra-rich and the ultra-determined. But instead, Napoleon Hill pulls a bait-and switch and hands you something that feels suspiciously like homework. It hits you around day 15. You're reciting your written goal for the 30th time, you know the one: by the 1st of September I will have earned X amount of dollars through creative expression, and your brain suddenly zones out halfway through. You're saying the words, but your eyes glaze over. You wonder if your brain is buffering. Like, did it crash mid-sentence? But then you realize, that's the whole point. Hill isn't trying to dazzle you. He's trying to drill something into your skull so deep that it bypasses your skepticism. He's trying to overwrite decades of passive thinking with this one single message: you become what you repeatedly tell yourself you are. And that's when the weird historical connection hits. You think about Winston Churchill. Specifically, during World War II. The guy wasn't exactly sunshine and motivational posters, but what he was consistent. When he wanted to instill courage in the British people, he didn't try 100 different speeches. He just kept saying the same things, over and over. We shall fight on the beaches. This was their finest hour, over and over until the words weren't just heard, they were believed. That's what repetition does. It isn't flashy. It's psychological graffiti. You see it so many times, you stop questioning it. And here's where your scholarly concept of the day comes in: neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections. Basically, when you repeat something often enough, your brain literally rewires itself to accommodate the idea. It's like laying down railroad tracks for your thoughts to ride on. So now, Napoleon Hill's obsession with repetition starts making sense. You're not just repeating goals like a robot. You're trying to remap your identity. To become someone who believes success is possible, not just hypothetically, but for you. Of course, your inner cynic still rolls its eyes. You remember that one time you tried doing daily affirmations years ago and gave up after 2 days because it felt ridiculous. You told yourself, "I am confident and magnetic," and then tripped on the sidewalk 5 minutes later. The irony was not lost on you. But this time is different. You're not just saying nice things to the mirror. You're anchoring your words in a goal, with a deadline and a plan. It's not just fluff, it's scaffolding. And weirdly, it starts to work. You wake up one morning and say your affirmation without cringing. You don't sound like a Hallmark card anymore. You sound determined. Like you believe it. A little. Enough. One day, during your 5th or 6th repetition, you get interrupted. The kettle boils, or the dog barks, or some leaf blower starts its daily act of war outside your window, and you feel annoyed. Not because of the noise, but because it interrupted your routine. That's when you know, the habit has taken hold. And that's the real change. You're no longer chasing the aha moment. You're living inside a slow-motion upgrade. Each repetition is one brick in the wall. You can't see the structure yet, but you know you're building something. By day 20, you've noticed a pattern. The people who succeed, in any field, are rarely the most inspired. They're the ones who show up every day, doing the same unsexy thing over and over, until it pays off. Writers who write every morning. Athletes who repeat drills until they blur. Entrepreneurs who pitch the same idea to 100 people before someone bites. And now, you're one of them. Sort of. You're repeating your goal so often that it starts to echo even when you're not thinking about it. At the grocery store. In the shower. Right before you fall asleep. You don't need to find motivation anymore. It's just sitting there, humming in the background. And sure, it doesn't always feel profound. There are mornings when you mutter your statement with the enthusiasm of a potato. But even that counts. Because repetition isn't about fireworks. It's about frequency. There's even science behind this. Cognitive psychologists talk about priming, the idea that repeated exposure to a stimulus makes you more likely to respond to it. In other words, if you keep repeating, "I'm building a successful creative business," then your brain starts scanning the world for proof that it's true. You notice more opportunities. You take different risks. You make slightly bolder choices. It's subtle. It's slow. But it's real. And maybe the best part? Repetition cuts through the noise. In a world where you're bombarded with thousands of messages a day, social media posts, ads, hot takes, memes. There's something weirdly peaceful about picking one message and letting it soak into your brain like tea in hot water. It becomes your anchor. Your reset button. Your North Star. So yeah, the big twist in Think and Grow Rich is that there's no twist. No ancient ritual. No dragon to slay. Just the quiet, persistent rhythm of saying what you want, over and over, until your brain finally believes you. It's not flashy. But it's kind of beautiful. So, here you are. You made it through 30 days of Napoleon Hill's world, the affirmations, the mirror pep talks, the mental rewiring, and yes, even that infamous chapter about turning primal urges into productivity. You took the trip. You stuck with it. And now? You're still you. Same thoughts, same laugh, same way you get distracted by clouds that look like pancakes. But something's shifted. Not a crash of lightning, not a lottery ticket, just a quiet new rhythm inside your mind. Like a gentle metronome tapping out a beat that says, you can do this, you're doing this, just keep going. Napoleon Hill didn't promise magic. What he gave was a blueprint, a set of mental tools that feel a little outdated, maybe a little dramatic, but strangely, timeless. Desire. Faith. Persistence. Focus. Over and over. Until one day, you wake up, and those aren't just words on a page, they're you. Woven into your thinking. Softly, solidly there. You probably won't remember every chapter. You might forget some of the stranger phrases. But the repetition? That sticks. The idea that if you show up every day, even when it's boring, even when it's quiet, the path begins to shape itself beneath your feet. And now, it's nighttime. Everything's slowing down. You've done enough for today. You've thought enough. Dreamed enough. The words can rest now. You can rest now. There's nothing else you need to become tonight. You're already becoming it. So take a breath. Let it go. Let the soft hum of your own persistence carry you into sleep, like a wave pulling back from shore, quiet and certain. You're doing just fine.